If you're serious about growing food that actually thrives, not just survives, you'll want to hear this. Before we get into it, make sure you subscribe to Evergreen Garden and drop a comment below with what you've tried to rebuild tired soil, because this one surprises even seasoned gardeners. I stumbled onto this method after years of hauling compost, turning piles, and waiting months for results, only to realize the soil could recharge itself faster if I stopped fighting nature and started letting it work. This forgotten fallow trick restored structure, fertility, and life to my soil in less time than compost ever did. Why compost alone sometimes isn't enough for worn-out soil. Compost is valuable, but it is not a cure-all. When soil has been cropped hard for years, especially in vegetable beds, the problem often goes deeper than missing nutrients. The biology collapses, fungal networks break, and the soil becomes compacted and lifeless. Adding compost on top can feed plants temporarily, but it does not always rebuild the underground system that makes soil truly fertile. I noticed that even with rich compost, water still pooled on the surface, roots stayed shallow, and yields plateaued. That's when I realized the soil needed rest, not more inputs. What fallowing really means when done correctly. Fallowing doesn't mean abandoning your garden or letting it turn into chaos. Traditional fallowing was a deliberate pause in cultivation that allowed soil life to recover. Now, the forgotten trick really is intentional fallow with controlled plant growth. Instead of leaving the soil bare, which, believe it or not, actually makes it degrade faster, you allow certain plants to grow and feed the soil microbes while you simply stop harvesting. In this approach, the soil itself becomes the crop for that season. And honestly, when you get it right, just one fallow cycle can actually outperform several applications of compost. Here's the thing. Living roots rebuild soil faster than even the biggest piles of compost. Living roots leak sugars into the soil every single day, feeding bacteria and fungi directly. Compost, on the other hand, feeds soil life just once, but roots keep it going continuously. During my first fallow season, I allowed fast-growing native weeds and volunteer plants to grow without interference. Within about 6 weeks, earthworms returned, the soil darkened, and compaction eased noticeably. The difference came from uninterrupted root activity. Fungal threads expanded, soil aggregates formed, and nutrients locked in the subsoil were pulled upward naturally. Choosing the right plants for a productive fallow period is crucial. Not all plants help equally during fallow, you know. The most effective combination includes shallow-rooted plants, deep tap roots, and nitrogen fixers. So, a practical ratio, is about 50% fast leafy growth, 30% deep-rooted plants, and 20% legumes. For example, allowing pigweed lamb's quarters or amaranth to grow alongside volunteer grasses creates this dense biomass, while plants like radish or dock really punch channels deep into compacted soil. Adding clover or cowpea, well, that fills the nitrogen gap. Even if these show up naturally, managing their balance is honestly what turns neglect into a proper strategy. How long should you leave soil fallow for real results? A fallow period doesn't need to last a full year. In most gardens, 8 to 12 weeks is usually enough to reset soil biology. I found that 10 weeks during warm weather delivered the best results. The key really is to stop disturbing the soil completely. No digging, no hoeing, and no pulling unless a plant threatens to go to seed uncontrollably. It's quite simple, isn't it? Managing growth without losing control of your garden, that's the trick. The biggest fear gardeners have is weeds taking over permanently. But the solution is timing. Just before plants flower and set seed, everything gets cut down at soil level. It's all about timing, really. The roots, well, they stay in the ground to decompose naturally, feeding microbes in place. The tops, on the other hand, are either left as mulch or lightly chopped and spread evenly. This creates a carbon-rich blanket that protects soil and suppresses future weeds. The ratio I use, and it works wonders, is leaving at least 2 inches of plant residue on the surface for every inch of soil depth I want to improve. Quite effective, I must say. So why does this method actually improve water retention and nutrient cycling? Well, after just one fallow cycle, water infiltration improves dramatically. In my own beds, the frequency of irrigation dropped by nearly 1/3, simply because the soil could finally absorb and hold onto moisture. Nutrients also stopped leaching away, which is just brilliant. With active fungal networks, phosphorus became available again, and I didn't even have to add any amendments. Calcium balanced itself naturally as organic acids from roots dissolved those bound minerals. And honestly, this is why fallow soil often outperforms heavily fertilized soil in the following season. Now, transitioning from fallow back to planting doesn't have to mean setbacks. When the fallow period ends, resist the urge to till, if you can. Instead, plant directly into the decomposing residue. If you're planting seedlings, just open a small hole and disturb as little soil as possible. For seeds, you want to clear a narrow strip that's just wide enough for germination. This really helps to preserve the rebuilt structure. In my garden, tomatoes planted after a fallow period showed thicker stems within about 3 weeks, and honestly, they needed no additional feeding until they started flowering. Why does this forgotten trick work in every climate, you might wonder? Well, it's because this method relies on biological processes, not products. Whether you're gardening in dry, wet, hot, or temperate regions, soil organisms respond in the same way to rest and living roots. Now, you should adjust your plant choices to suit your climate, but remember, the principle remains unchanged. Even a short fallow during a shoulder season can restore balance faster than months of composting. If this guide has helped shift how you think about soil, make sure to subscribe to Evergreen Garden for more deep, practical gardening knowledge that actually works. Share this with a fellow gardener who's stuck chasing fertility with compost alone, and leave a comment telling me how you plan to use fallowing in your garden this season.